Welcome to the Importing and Exporting Material and Unit of Measure Mapping Tables tutorial for the Impact Estimator for Buildings. This tutorial is an adjunct to the Bill of Materials import tutorials, parts 1 and 2, and it's assumed that you have previously viewed those tutorials. In those tutorials, we saw where we can map our own material names to the Impact Estimator material names, and we ended up with a material mapping library that I'm accessing here through the Tools menu. And here are the 4 concretes and the 2 steels, which we have previously mapped as materials. These are our own material names that came from our CAD program or from our export file. And these are the Impact Estimator's material names that they are mapped to. Once you've mapped these material names, you want to be able to reuse them, and perhaps for other people in your office to be able to use them as well. So you want to export this mapping library so that somebody else can import it into their computer, and then they can use the same mapping names that you've used, assuming that you use the same material names in your CAD projects. So it's quite simple. You just click Export up here, and a box comes up, and I'm going to save it as mapping table.xml. And I click Save, and I save that file. And I click OK, and that's it. I've exported my file. Now, to demonstrate how you can use this on another machine, I'm just going to try importing it back into my library. So I'm going to click on this again. And I'm going to remove my 2 steels from my list here. And click OK. So now, on my machine, I'm going to have only my concretes in my mapping library. And I'm going to import that file that I just exported, and it should add the 2 steels back into my local copy on my machine. So I'll hit cancel here. Actually, I shouldn't have done that. I'll click Tools, Material Mapping Library. I'm in this form, and I'm just going to import. And I'm going to choose that file which I just exported a minute ago, called Mapping Table. Double click on it, and you see as it has added those materials. In fact, it tried to add all 6, but it won't duplicate material names. So it's added those 2 steels back into my local copy of my table. So I click OK there. If I open it again, that's where they are. And now I've taken essentially a table from another machine and imported it into the library on this machine, and that way only one person has to do the material mappings and can share them with the rest of the office. The same thing can be done with units of measurement. So I'm going to open the unit of measurement library, and in this table we have at the top a whole bunch of gray entries which are from the database, and they're in the program and you can't edit those, but you can add user-defined units of measurement. And this is what we did in those previous tutorials, where we added cubic feet as a unit, just CF, and we converted it to meters cubed here. So if I want to have one person in the office do all these mappings for me and then share them with the rest of the office, I can do the same thing. I can export this list here. I'm going to change it to UOM table.xml. Hit save, and I've exported it. So let's say now that I want to import it. I'm going to do exactly the same thing, but just to prove that it works, I'm going to remove that CF entry, and I'm going to insert a new unit. I'll just call it unit demo. I'll give it a number, a conversion factor here, and I'm going to change that to kilograms, and I'm going to click OK. So the mapping library for units of measurement on my local machine includes only the unit demo user-defined unit down here that we've just created. And if I'm going to import the list that I just created a minute ago, table, there it is. I've added CF back into the list, and that way you can share all these mappings with other colleagues in the office, and only one person has to do the legwork the first time. A short note on some of these units of measure. Some of them look a little odd. We have up here, for instance, SF 1 inch in brackets. That's square feet on a 1 inch basis. And this is SF on a 3/8 inch basis. Now SF on a 1 inch basis in imperial units is the same as meters, or is converted to meters squared on a 25 millimeter basis. And this is a unit measure that we use for insulation thicknesses typically. If, for example, you entered a 1 inch thickness of 1 square foot of a certain insulation in the impact estimator, in the bill of materials you'll get 1 square foot at 1 inch. If you entered 1 square foot at 2 inches of thickness, then the number in the bill of materials would be 2 square feet on a 1 inch basis. The same goes for plywood and OSB. I'm going to move down here on the list a little bit. Plywood and OSB are typically expressed in MSF 1 inch, MSF 3/8 of an inch, and that is 1,000 square feet on a 3/8 inch basis, which in the metric equivalent is meters squared on a 9 millimeter basis. So if you have 3/4 inch plywood in an assembly, you need to express it as a number of 3/8 inch thickness plywood. 3/8 is half of 3/4. So 1 MSF of 3/4 inch plywood is equal to 2 MSF of 3/8 inch plywood. There are many different plywood thicknesses. Everything needs to be reduced to meters squared on a 9 millimeter basis. That's 3/8 inches. By the way, when you convert any unit in this library, you need to convert it to the metric equivalent in Impact Estimator. So in this column over here, only metric units are available. So we have a bunch of conversion factors from a bunch of different thicknesses of plywood. So let's just go down here to the imperial units. So for instance here, I've got MSF of 3/4 inch plywood gets converted by this number here to turn into meters squared of 9 millimeter plywood. And these are here just for shows the common thicknesses of plywood. You of course can, if you have a different thickness in your assemblies, you can make your own user-defined conversion factor for it down here and add it to your list down here. Another odd unit up here is 100 square feet. That's called a square in the roofing industry, and they often refer to the number of squares of roofing, which is 10 by 10 foot square. So roofing materials in imperial units are referred to as in 100 square foots, and they're converted to meters squared here. So if you have 100 square feet, that means you have 100 square feet. The other is MBFM of lumber, 1,000 board feet measured of lumber. The oddity here is that there is a different conversion factor depending on the size of lumber from MBFM to meters cubed. So in the Impact Estimator, we have a conversion factor from 1,000 board feet of small dimension lumber, and that's defined as 2x3s, 2x4s, 2x6s, or 2x8s, to meters cubed of 1.54. But for large dimension number, for 2x10s and 2x12s, we have a different conversion factor of 1.63 to meters cubed of lumber. It's just something to be aware of if you're wanting to use one of these conversion factors to create your own user-defined conversion, or if you're trying to choose which one to use in your material mapping. That concludes the importing and exporting material and unit of measure mapping tables tutorial.